If you own a small business and you might be looking to sell, you could run into some major issues. Forbes estimates that 9 out of 10 businesses listed never actually sell. Why? Because there's only one way to sell. You need to do these 4 steps first. So if you want to be a part of the 10% of businesses that sell for profits, we've created a free checklist for you so you can sell without those hurdles that normally hold you back. Download the free checklist by visiting www.abundantculture.co/checklist.
Welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast, where business owners like you come to learn how to grow the valuation of their companies so they can sell in the future. On this show, you'll learn how to sell for top dollar and invest in profitable businesses around the country. Now, here are your hosts, Jazz and Joe.
Hey, it's Joe. Welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast. We're so glad to have you back again this week. As a small business owner, you know just as well as I do that growing a business takes time. It takes energy, it takes effort, it takes capital, all of those things. But the great part about technology is that if you use it correctly, that it takes a lot less time and a lot less other resources as well. So we're getting ready to interview someone today that is a technology integrator. He is going to tell us about how to integrate technology in order to make the repetitive task in your business automatic so that you don't have to worry about doing repetitive tasks over and over again and wasting countless precious hours doing things in your business that can be done all by themselves. So get ready to listen to and learn from our good friend, DJ Scruggs.
Hi, DJ, and thank you again for coming on to the Abundant Culture Podcast. We are super excited to have you today because we've seen your work. We know how much of an asset you are to your team, and you're a really great person overall. So we're just really excited to finally have you on the podcast. But before we started getting into the meat and potatoes of the episode, we have to ask you, what is your backstory? How'd you get into business? How'd you get into this business specifically?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure. I know you guys through our mastermind group, and it's always great to connect with you guys and see the cool stuff you're doing. So my background is, I guess, a little eclectic. I was originally in college. Well, I was originally a theater major. I had dreams of being a Hollywood actor, and that lasted for about 10 minutes. And then I switched over to the much more practical music. And I was fortunate to go to a really good school in Chicago, but the unfortunate part is everyone there is way more talented than I was. And not even so much talent, just the drive they all have. You know, the people who will go into a practice room and spend 8 hours working on orchestral excerpts and things like that. And I realized pretty quickly I didn't have that kind of drive for it. I did enjoy learning about music, but when I got out of college, and actually I ended up getting my degree in education, but by my senior year, I realized I didn't want to be a teacher. And it was an expensive school. I couldn't afford to do the 5, 6, 7 year plan that some people do. And so I just graduated and said, okay, now what do I do? And this is back in 1990. And I got out. At that time, the economy was just about to head into a recession. That was when Bill Clinton was elected. That's way before your time probably, but that just sort of sets the scene. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was working for a nonprofit for a while, and I started reading Inc. magazine, and they just made it sound so possible. They would interview all these different entrepreneurs. And it wasn't anything super sexy like high tech. It would be, a plumbing business or, just anything like that was just very nuts and bolts. And at the same time, in my job, I was using computers a lot, even though I hadn't really used them much in college. And so I just discovered I had a knack for just kind of understanding computers. I wouldn't call myself a programmer then, but I just had a real knack for it. And after kind of bouncing around and picking up some skills along the way, I learned a fair amount about accounting. And I wouldn't have called myself a programmer, but I was kind of like a power user was the term we used back then. And then the internet was really starting to take off. This is around 95, 96. And I remember it was one Thanksgiving weekend. I lived in Chicago, but I grew up in Georgia, and I used to go home every year for Thanksgiving. And for some reason that year, I couldn't go home. I can't remember if it was weather or something else. So I just stayed alone that weekend. And I got on the internet really for the first time. I had used it at the office at work, but it was really limited what we had access to. And I just literally spent the whole weekend online. And this is over a dial-up modem, and I was just mesmerized. And just to give you a sense of how early I was one of the first 10,000 Match.com members, which means
Wow.
I got a free account for life.
Nice.
I haven't used it in a long time, but that just sort of gives you a sense of how long I've been online. And I just remember thinking, this is going to be big. I've got to do something, anything on the internet. And I started a company that made really one of the first email customer service systems. It was for I met with a potential customer and saw how much email they were getting and what a disaster it was to manage it. And so we built that. And, it sounds easy, but it was hard. I mean, because I was able to raise money for it, but it wasn't like a venture capitalist just wrote me a big check. It was a bunch of local investors who were all smart guys, but they weren't really tech guys. They were all options traders. And so they kept investing, but it was always 10,000 here, 20,000 there. And so it was just very stressful. And we're trying to build this product, and I've never really managed a product before. And I was starting to go out to Silicon Valley to pitch venture capitalists. And it kind of went from, we don't think this is a real product category. That was kind of their talk. We think this is just something that the call center companies are going to do. And then 6 months later, as I went out, they said, but come back when you make progress. And I made progress, and I came back, and they said, yeah, we've already invested in, the two companies that are based here in Silicon Valley. So you're kind of out of luck. This is back before there were blogs or anything. So, getting on the phone or getting a venture capitalist to return your email was like thrilling, and they were just these mysterious figures. You didn't really know much about them except that they had the keys to the kingdom. And in any case, long story short, with that company, I raised it. We built a product. We had a few sales. And then I was just cold calling venture capitalists. And one of them, a guy named Brad Feld, who's pretty well known these days, he was and still is in Boulder, Colorado. I had called him, and amazingly, he called me back. And he didn't invest in the company; he ended up buying the company. And the idea back then was to build this sort of roll up of different email service providers. So we provided customer service software they had invested in, and then did this kind of weird reverse merger to go public with an email marketing company. So then I was working at really one of the first email marketing companies. And I rode the .com roller coaster all the way up and all the way down. And then from there, I just kind of iterated. I did a bunch of different tech startups over the years. Some of them I either started myself or I was a very early employee to. Did that for a long time. But the thing that I learned is, first of all, it's kind of a young man's game in the sense that the hours you work and a lot of times what you're doing is based on, let me put it this way. If you want to build $1 billion company today, you're using a technology that most people aren't using yet. Right, that's part of the advantage. Like Uber with cell phones, smartphones. You're using a new technology probably, and that means you have to stay on top of emerging technologies and either be able to build it yourself or recruit people who can do it. And then even if you do get it right and you build a successful company, well then all your competitors are trying to steal your employees. So it's always stressful no matter what. I mean, I wouldn't mind the money, but I wouldn't want to run Google right now, because it's just always around the corner. There's this anxiety. So after a few of those, I got kind of tired of that and started looking around to, maybe sort of shift my career focus. And it was about 5 years ago, I really started looking at real estate. And I knew, coming from a tech background, I do like to think at scale. I want to build big things that can replicate pretty easily.
Yeah.
And so I started out with flipping houses, but knew all along I wanted to get into something like multifamily. And that's what I ended up getting into when we started BlueSpruce Holdings. And so that's really my focus now, is multifamily real estate.
Awesome.
So can you tell us more about the BlueSpruce Holdings? Like, how did all you guys come together, and what is your role specifically in the company?
Sure. So being a tech guy, one thing I noticed right away in real estate is it's not very tech savvy. It can look like it is. If you go on Zillow, that's like really cool to play with Zillow. But in terms of just the blocking and tackling of everyday greasing the wheels that makes your business run faster, smoother, at a lower cost, I felt like what I was seeing was just frankly not very impressive, and in some cases downright like, why are they doing it that way? So I knew I had some kind of value to add around the tech component. What I don't like doing, even though I've raised money before, is I'm not an extrovert. I'm pretty hard introvert. COVID really hasn't affected me very much at all. Like, I'm really fine just staying at home and talking to people on Zoom. And so I knew I wanted to find someone who was more of an extrovert, right? And also, I had learned real estate on my own, but there's always more to learn. And I was really concerned, like, what do I not know that might come bite me later on? So I was looking to find people who are knowledgeable, ideally someone who likes to go out and meet people. And so Adam Adams, who a lot of people probably know, he started this meetup in Denver. It was just called the Creative Real Estate Meetup. And I went to the very first one, and there were 5 or 6 people there. And I went to a couple, and I remember thinking, yeah, this is a guy I should know. And before long, after a few months, instead of 5 or 6 people, he was having 50 or 60. And so I could see, yeah, this guy has a talent for getting in front of a lot of people. And so I was looking for something like that. He was already working with my other partner, Manny, who is, in addition to a lot of things, he's a real estate agent. So he knows a lot about the nuts and bolts of transactions and, how do we do things legally. And so, I just kept sort of hinting them, hey guys, I want to work with you. Let's find a way to work together. And then they had decided they wanted to get into multifamily, and we all together went through a training program to learn it. And, like a lot of those training programs, there's a lot of good information there, but it leaves out a lot of the intermediate steps of how do you implement this stuff?
Yeah.
They make it sound like, oh, you just go out and you buy a property, and, you take 30% and the investors take 70% and you're all happy. And, they leave out how many properties you have to look at to do that. How do you go about finding those investors? And so there was a lot of trial and error on our part to do that. But now, like, there's always room for improvement. We're always looking for ways to improve. But now I feel like we've got a pretty good system in terms of how do we attract investors kind of into the top end of the funnel and move them through the process? How do we evaluate properties and make sure that we're getting into a good deal and staying away from bad deals? And my role is really kind of mostly behind the scenes. I do a lot of the sort of the technical integration, the asset management. Like right now, I'm actually at one of our properties. We had to let go of a property manager, and I'm sort of filling in for the moment, but it's actually been a great opportunity because there's some technical stuff. It's just ways that we were just really inefficient.
Yeah.
And so for the last 3 weeks, I've been just doing a lot to streamline the system. And I haven't even really started interviewing new property managers yet, because when they come in, I want it to be the easiest job in the world. I just want them to know that they just push this button and do this thing and answer this phone call and say these words. And so I'm actually really enjoying that part of it. So I guess you could say that my role is to kind of keep the gears turning, and keep it and turn it into a well-oiled machine.
Absolutely. So, if you don't mind, tell us about some of the softwares and different types of technology that have been very pivotal in the business that you guys are in. Because I think every time I get on one of the mastermind calls, I hear about like something that you guys integrated into your business, and a lot of the stuff is amazing. Like, I didn't even know that there was a service that you could pay for, or a website that you could go to and maybe pay a little money, and they will help you get onto other people's podcasts. And I feel like technology is one of those things where if you don't use it, then you can still get things done, but it's going to be in a very inefficient way. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort.
And you'll be far behind.
Yeah, but I think a lot of small business owners could benefit from using technology to get the same result that they want before, but just a lot easier. So what are some of those technologies that you guys use?
There's a ton of them. I wrote a blog post. It's been probably a couple years ago. I can share it with you guys to put in the show notes or whatever, but that just sort of talks about some of the stuff we use. But just off the top of my head, so we use Active Campaign for email. We use We've recently, really in the last year, moved over a lot of our investor communications to Syndication Pro, which is like an online portal for investors. We use a platform called Zapier a lot, which helps you connect different platforms. So when someone registers for a Zoom webinar, how do we make sure they get into ActiveCampaign? Now, what you can do is just wait till the webinar's over, download the CSV file, and then import it up into ActiveCampaign. That's what most people do. But with something like Zapier, you can set it up where as soon as they register, it automatically puts them in to ActiveCampaign, and it'll, depending on the nature of the webinar, we might put them on a special list that starts receiving emails automatically, things like that. For scheduling, we use Calendly a lot. I think you guys might use that too. And for property management, we've been using Buildium. That's what I've been neck deep in the last few weeks. That's really good for just getting a handle on it's really geared toward property management companies. And so it's pretty well thought out in terms of all the different pieces that you need to be able to run a multifamily enterprise. And then there's a ton of just like stuff I use on a personal level that makes me more efficient. So I use Gmail for email, and we recently started using a product called Sorted, which is spelled SORTD. So like sort with a D on the end. Mm-hmm. And so before that, we used a product called Trello. We still use that for some things. Trello comes from the software world. You may have heard the phrase like agile development or agile teams. It's a card-based approach to your to-do list, and you have columns. So, on the left side, if you can imagine a column that has, to do, and then in the middle, there's a column that says doing, and then another column that says review or QA or whatever. You can make up names however way you want to do it. And then visually, it looks almost like Post-it notes or 3x5 cards that you put on the wall, so you can watch them move through the columns. And that's a really popular technology, Trello is, and there's a lot of variations on it. People use that sort of layout design. But we started using Sorted because it directly integrates with Gmail. And so what that means is, like, I might get an email that has something that I need to act on. I need to download this thing or create this presentation or run this by one of my team members. Mm-hmm. And so with Sorted, you can just drag that into the Sorted layout, and people can work with it within Gmail. And so that reduces a lot of the friction. They're not having to switch over to Trello to use it. It's all like right there in Gmail. So we've been using that just for the last few months, but I really like it.
That's awesome.
That's a good one. I really like that platform.
Yeah.
So you listed like a bunch, kinda. So how many, like when somebody tries to integrate technology, how much is too much? Like what is going too far, and then maybe it makes them more inefficient than they were before?
I guess it comes down to whatever task it is you're trying to automate. How many times are you doing it? Like, so something like getting someone's business card into ActiveCampaign, for example, or whatever email system you're using. If you're rarely collecting business cards and you're only doing that once a month and it's just 2 business cards, there's probably not a lot of value in optimizing that. You can optimize it. There's a platform called Contacts Plus where you can take a picture of a business card and it's transcribed, and then you can use Zapier to push it into your system. And I actually built that. We have that, but I can't remember the last time I took a picture of a business card. It's been, especially because we're not going to any networking events, right? Yeah. So, but for some people that's revelatory. I remember showing it to some people they're networking mavens, and what they end up happening is they have a drawer full of 500 business cards that they've never put into a system at all.
That used to be us.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be an example. I think also there is a real, if you're sort of a technophile like me, I mean, I'm always just kind of noticing new technologies. It's just where my eye goes. I'll hear about something, it's linked in an email, or there'll be an article about it, and then I'll go play around with it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like productivity porn. You just like, ooh, if I just had this thing, then my business would run so smoothly. It's almost never the case. And so it's fine to have some trial and error and play around with stuff, but you also have to be a little disciplined. I mean, I mean, there's been so many technologies where I thought, yeah, we could use this, and then I'll play around with it, and then I'll just kind of do the math in my head of, well, how many hours am I going to invest in integrating this, and am I actually saving hours? Like, I mean, one of the smartest things we've been doing this for a while, but I personally have been taking advantage of it, is to use VAs. I mean, a lot of stuff that, yeah, I could automate it, or I could just pay someone $4 or $5 an hour overseas just to do it manually.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it's something that can't be truly automated, like yeah, you can get 80% of the way there, but that other 20% is important, and it's something you do repetitively, then it's a good idea to have somebody's eyes on it who can just sort of finish it up for you. Now, one thing I just did that I don't know that this will be useful for anyone listening, but it gives you kind of an example of the types of things that are possible. This property I'm at right now, the way it works is all utilities are paid for the tenants, but the electricity bill, we basically give them the first $50, and then if they go over 50, we bill them for the difference. And the company, the utilities company, they give us this giant PDF of every unit, right? And they leave it to us to actually do the billing. And I really wanted them to give it. I said, "Can you give it to us like in a CSV file or a spreadsheet?" And they were just like, "No." And so for a long time I was stuck. And then I just literally the other day I Googled, parse PDF document, and it turns out there's all these tools out there that can, you can input a PDF, and if it's in a regularized format, it can break it up into pieces and turn that into a spreadsheet. And so I started playing around with that. And I got pretty far down the road, but then I got stuck. And then it turns out the company that does it has a service that you can pay them $99 to build what you need. And I realized, yeah, it's way more cost efficient for me just to pay them the $99 than it is for me to spend 10 hours learning how to use this. And so they did that, and now I still have got a few more things I'm going to do, but now I'm very close to where all the property manager will have to do is download the bill, email it to them, it'll come back all parsed and ready, and then they just have to get it input into the our property management software. And it goes from, I can show you, it goes from something like this where, I'm scrolling and writing and, calculating, to all in a spreadsheet, and it's automatically calculated.
That's awesome.
That is really awesome. So one of the things I was wondering for myself, and Jasmine did it, so she has a better understanding than I do. You mentioned a while back that you guys use ActiveCampaign for emails. I think there's probably a lot of people who are using other different types of email services. So like, what made you choose ActiveCampaign over maybe a MailChimp or something else like that?
So yeah, there are scads of these services. And I mean, I mentioned at the very beginning, the first company that bought my first company, they were at one point, they were worth $1 billion. They were an email marketing company. They ended up crashing because they had the mistaken idea that it's going to be like the consumer internet, which in the sense that back then Google was just getting started. So it was all like Yahoo. Yahoo dominates search, and Amazon dominates e-tail, they called it back then. And so it was like, well, we're going to be the ones who dominate email marketing. And it turns out that that's impossible. With B2B services, there's always a way to niche down and find an angle to be different. So I've worked with those technologies for a long time, so I have a pretty good sense of what it is I'm looking for. But I looked at a bunch of them, and what sort of made me settle on ActiveCampaign was the automation, the way you can build pretty complex sequences of emails and other events that drive activity. That was probably the biggest thing. And like MailChimp, I believe, offers automation now, but I just remember the UI. I liked the UI of ActiveCampaign better, and it was a good value for the price. I mean, it doesn't have a free version like MailChimp, but at the price where we were, we had a smaller list then, it's bigger now, but even now it's still just a really good value. I will say though that with any of these platforms, probably the most important thing is just to pick one and stick with it.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be something you don't like. That, oh, I wish it did this thing, or I wish it did that thing. And, or you're going to see someone else's and go, oh, I wish ours did that. But you really have to sort of pick it and stick with it. And just, when someone's trying to pitch you something new, just say, nope. And for whatever it is you pick, with something like Zapier, I mentioned, there's probably a way to get it to do what you need it to do. It might be a little bit of a workaround or a little kludgy, but there's usually some way to get it to fit whatever your business case is.
Awesome.
So if someone has a business and they're not tech savvy at all, they need like that integrator kind of person on their team, how would you suggest that they find that?
Well, they could join our mastermind and I'll do it. How do you find that kind of person?
It's a great mastermind, by the way, for anybody who's
yes.
listening. We're a part of it. And
The value is just extraordinary.
like our business wouldn't be where we are today if it weren't for that mastermind.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
Oh.
And look for the check in the mail shortly. It is hard to find those people. There's a lot of them out there, but I don't know that I have a foolproof way. I would almost say maybe I should start one. I'm sure there's some out there like online courses about how do you sort of vet tech people. I mean, there's plenty of low cost platforms like Upwork and Fiverr or things like that. But I would say that the biggest challenge is describing your problem in a way that's understandable, right? That's sequential, right? So that's probably the first thing is just sit down and write it out exactly what you want to happen. And, it can't be something like, I want everyone who contacts me to go into a database. That's a good goal, but that's not a process, right? Yeah. So you need to think about it. Well, how do they contact you? Well, I meet them at this event, or I do a webinar, or, I have a form on my website, and just sort of map those things out. And then once you have some clarity about what it is you need, then you can take it to these platforms. Because, to be honest, a lot of the people on those platforms, they're sort of low-cost people in foreign countries who don't speak English very well, right? And so, if you sort of give them a really vague description of what you want, they're either not going to understand you, or they're just going to crank out something that technically matches the description, but is not elegant and easy to use.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the sort of the pitfall. Maybe I should create a course on that because it's hard. It's kind of like not that I'm anywhere like this, but it's like Michael Jordan trying to teach someone how to play basketball. He's just so good at it, that you don't want him to be your coach. Because he's just going to say, no, you just shoot it and score. You drive to the hole and dunk it. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He's not going to be able to explain all the nuance of how to get from just sort of an average player to a great player.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm a little nervous about saying just do these things and it'll all work out. It's something that you have to, like I said, either join the mastermind or just talk to a lot of people and get a lot of different input until you get a sense that someone's not BSing you. Tech can be really bad at people will promise the sun, the moon, and the stars at a really reasonable price, but what you get is not the sun, the moon, and the stars. But
a good first step is always to understand what you want to happen in some type of detail, and then just give that to somebody for the implementation of it. And I found that even in my business, that's what helps, because a lot of times what'll happen, I think, as an entrepreneur is you have this vision of what you want your end goal to be. And then you tell somebody the end goal, but they don't see it how you see it. So you have to spend time in understanding what that process might actually look like to communicate that to them so that they can actually do something with it. And it's something that, I had to work on. Even I think a couple weeks ago, I asked you about something was going on with my spreadsheet, and it was like super, super weird. And I think one of the only reasons that you were able to kind of help with that is because you had dealt with that problem, because I don't think I did a great job at explaining what actually was going wrong at the time. But the better and better I got at explaining what the issue was, the more feedback I was able to get. And that's something that I think is pivotal. I think that's something that's very important for any entrepreneur, because if you're going to build something at scale, you need people who can implement pretty complex ideas and processes that you might not know how to actually implement.
If you don't diversify your investment portfolio, you could end up losing it all. But most business owners don't know how to diversify to mitigate those risks. That's why we created this resource for you. This passive investing guide is a must-have if you're planning to invest in businesses. Don't hesitate. If you have more than 25 grand liquid, then you can't afford not to take advantage of this resource. Download the 4 reasons why in 2021 you need small businesses in your portfolio now by going to www.abundantculture.co/guide.
Yeah, I mean, and also just the exercise, you can just do it by hand on a piece of paper, just sort of map out a flow chart. What a good design developer will notice is the exceptions, right? So sure, you want them all to go into the email list, but what if, like this is really common in a networking context. You go out and you're meeting all these people that you want to be investors, but it turns out most of them are real estate and insurance agents. So what do you do with those,
Yeah,
right? Do you want to be sending them your investor emails? Maybe you do. I mean, maybe it makes sense, but maybe they should be going into a different list
absolutely.
than your key investor list.
Yeah.
Our overall list is several thousand, but our investor list is closer to 1,000. We don't just dump everyone into that.
Yeah.
So we want to ask you, for the person that's listening right now, if they could just walk away with one takeaway from this episode, what would it be?
Well, I think let me go back to when I started my first company. The thing that really sort of hit me when I had this a lot, like I said, I studied music. I wasn't a programmer, I wasn't a tech guy. And I had this idea in my head that I had to have a computer science degree or something like that, in order to do it. And then I like read an article, it was in Inc. magazine about, again, this is the early 90s, how some giant companies of the era got started, like Motorola and Hewlett Packard are the two that I remember. And, those were and are enormous companies that have built a lot of amazing products. But when they first started, they were just a couple of guys in a garage, the classic Silicon Valley story. And some of them, like Motorola, I believe, they didn't know what their product was going to be. They just said, we want to start a company that's electronics based. This is back in the 40s. And then they just did it. And that's when it kind of hit me. It's like pretty much everything you see in the world that's not nature, that's not a mountain or something, someone had an idea to create that.
Yeah.
Whether it's the chair you're sitting on or the software you're using. And that's where they started. And some had, really natural abilities to create it themselves, but the vast majority of them didn't. I mean, Steve Jobs wasn't even a programmer, but he's thought of as one of the great innovators of all time. So having that mindset of, well, I'm just going to start doing it. And taking that attitude, it's funny because I had done a little bit of programming at that point, but I was still just a nobody, very junior. And, I wasn't going to win any awards for my brilliant developer skills. But then when I started calling myself CEO, I started taking meetings with vice presidents and other CEOs. Maybe not at Fortune 500 companies, but at successful companies.
Yeah.
And it was like my whole network just kind of shifted because I had a new title and, frankly, talked a good game. So I would say that for anything you're thinking about doing, take the time to learn it. Don't just do something that you totally don't understand what you're doing. But my sister has a saying that, an expert is an average guy from out of town. That's the person speaking at the front of the seminar room, and there is a little bit of fake it till you make it to it. So be willing to go out, put yourself out there, and I guess know that you're going to make some mistakes and you might even embarrass yourself sometimes. But no one comes into this world with all the skills they need, or even most of the skills they need. You develop those by going out and just kind of bumping up against the real world and developing them.
Absolutely. Yeah. For sure. So that was a great takeaway. You're on the Abundant Culture podcast, and we feel the need to ask this question to everyone who comes on because we always get very interesting and unique answers. And the question is, whether it be in your personal life or in your business, how do you like to spread abundance to the people around you?
Oh, I like to do it very directly. I mean, I do give to some nonprofits. Mostly, my big issues are education, animal welfare, and mental health. So, I give just automatically out of my bank account to a few different around those. But, I like to they say you shouldn't, but I do it, give money to homeless people. One year, I didn't do it this year because just of COVID and stuff, but I bought a box from Amazon of just cashew nuts, those little packets, they're like 4 ounces each. Mm-hmm. And, so for a while I had those before Christmas, and I would just, when I saw someone standing by the freeway, I would just, and they were always glad to get it, or at least they pretended. And so then one Christmas, what I did is I stapled $5 bills to them and put little stickers, sort of Santa Claus stickers and things like that on them. And just to see the look in people's eyes when you gave them that. At first they thought, oh, I'm getting some nuts. Let's go. Oh, wait, there's a $5 bill here on here. And then Merry Christmas, And so I just really like to to be as direct and as close to the giving as possible.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's a very unique idea. I like
Yeah.
that. I want to try that one day.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to either work with you or your team, how would they get into contact with you all?
I guess the best way is just to email me directly, just dj@realbluespruce.com. I'm not super present on social media. I used to be, but I really dialed it back because I feel like it's bad for the world in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
My partner, Adam, is all over Facebook and lately Clubhouse, and he makes it work for him. And so that's probably a good way to reach out as well. But I feel like social media has really distorted the world in ways. Yeah. So I've been kind of pulling back from it and just, send me an email and we can chat. And it's real as in real estate, blue is the color, and spruce like the tree, realbluespruce.com.
Awesome.
Well, thank you again so much for coming onto the podcast, because I'm sure this is going to help so many people. The person that's listening right now, they just got extreme value for the amount of time that it took. So we truly appreciate it. Yeah, we did.
Well, it's my pleasure. I really like you guys and what you're doing, and anything I can do to help you or your audience, I'm game.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Abundant Culture Podcast with Jazz and Joe. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, then leave an honest rating and review. And remember, we're ready to buy your business. So if you're ready to sell or passively invest in other small businesses, go to abundantculture.co for more information. We publish episodes every Friday, so we'll see you next week.